Aries, spring, the element of fire, the planet Mars, Archangel Samael, the Martian warrior. Why Martian? Why this sort of alien feeling? Well, because Aries represents individuality. And we also call Aries Martian because Martian means an imaginary being or a being of imagination. And imagination is a strong theme here because Aries is also related to clairvoyance, as taught in the previous video in this series. With Aries, we have now arrived at the top of the human body, since Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, which is the head, the brain, the highest chakras, where our third eye is, where our imagination is. Some people may get confused relating imagination with clairvoyance, and that's because most people's imagination is unconscious and is trapped and conditioned by being deeply attached to the world of the external sense perceptions. And little to no training has been done to develop the faculty of the inner senses of clairvoyance. But with Aries and the time that we're in now, gives us the opportunity and the potential to transform our ego imagination and liberate it into purified conscious imagination, free from the entrapments of thought, desire, likes, dislikes, dogmas, beliefs, endless distractions and entertainment, etc. Liberated, unconditioned, universal imagination, connected to the Akashic element. That is one way we could describe clairvoyance. And in order to develop this innate capacity that we all have, we have to learn how to be completely alone and in solitude, mentally and internally. That doesn't mean we run away from people or circumstances externally, but it means internally. We recognize that everything we perceive through our five senses is processed, manipulated, interpreted by our own ego, our own subjective ego. So therefore, we don't actually perceive reality in the full sense of that word. Instead, we only perceive our own subjectivity. So the world or the external world is simply a reflection or a mirror of our subjectivity. So to practice or to recognize being alone and abiding in inner solitude, which really is part of meditation, is just totally logical. And it means we act more in accordance with the truth, rather than pretending that it's not that way, right? The truth that we are alone, as long as we are interpreting reality through the ego. Okay, so you might have to reflect on that a little bit, right? It's really important to understand. For example, you're watching me on the screen right now, right? Maybe you're alone wherever you are right now. And let's say I'm now physically with you in person. If I was, you'd still be alone, psychologically. You wouldn't really be seeing me. You don't really know me, right? Or you don't really perceive me in a real way. What you would experience or what you would perceive with me is simply your own egoic interpretations, ideas, reactions, emotions, thoughts, opinions, excitement, likes, dislikes, etc. This is all your own subjectivity. So whether you like it or not, you are completely alone. You find yourself totally alone, and everything in the outer world is simply a reflection of yourself. And just how Aries is the beginning of the zodiac, this is where we all begin on the spiritual path, finding ourselves totally alone on our path by realizing the illusory nature of reality and understanding the necessity to renounce it and begin to look within for the real truth. Because as long as we don't renounce external attachments and believing in them as true, then we simply continue living in a way that is false, in the sense that we think we are in the company of others and maybe taking psychological comfort in thinking about others as our friends, or trying to rely on humanity, or, there's a lot of ways that we do this. We take psychological comfort in thinking that just because we go to church once a week, we're going to be saved, or we think that Elon Musk is going to save us all and we're going to go to Mars. It's a form of laziness, really, laziness to not discover the truth about things and relying on these illusions in the external world, thinking that they're somehow going to save us or something like that, right? So real meditation is about being totally alone, and this is the beginning of true individuality. And the harsh truth is, even with our friends who we think we know, right, we form an image of them, right? Do we actually know our friends, or do we just have an image of them, right? An imagination of them, ideas, opinions. It's exactly the same as when we're in a lucid dream and we see our friends in our dreams. They're not our friends. They're just products of our unconscious ego imagination. And actually, this is quite a selfish way to live, never really knowing others because we don't know ourselves. So if we really want to become a true friend, a real brother or sister towards humanity, then we have to become conscious of our unconscious projections about other people. This is how we learn to love others, by not judging them or assuming that we know them. You see, non-judgment is not a matter of ethics, but it's a scientific, logical way to perceive reality. So, by comprehending all of this in combination with deep meditation, we can begin to understand how to be free. Free from everything and everyone. Schools, religions, authorities, society, everything. So that we can experience the answer to the question of, who am I? Beyond all of these imaginations. Who am I, actually? And through this inquiry, we can begin to experience our individual essence, our being, not the ego and its illusory projections, but our own particular divine essence, our soul, our consciousness. This is why meditation is so important, to isolate and discern our egos from our essence and recognize what is true within us, the superior qualities, virtues, and values of ourself, which derive from our being. And that's what we need desperately on this planet now, for people to recognize what is real within them as an individual, and not just live a life which is simply the result and expression of the collective unconsciousness of humanity. Those who express these qualities of unconsciousness and ego and societal nonsense, they do not receive the right to be called individuals. They're just sheep, right? Which is us, really. If we're really honest with ourselves, we're sheep and we know nothing. And to those who maybe react to that, well, as long as you don't accept that in yourself and you don't really see it for yourself in a real way in your heart, then you'll never really come to know anything. Because we first have to see how asleep we really are if we want to awaken, if we want to experience gnosis, experience real practical knowledge. We have to psychologically comprehend how we are programmed and determined by the illusory external sense perceptions of reality, completely lost and suffering in the outer world. And this all relates to Aries. Why? Because a true embodied Aries, or anyone with strong Aryan energy, anyone who carries strong Martian energy, completely rebels internally against social, spiritual, religious, cultural norms. They won't blindly accept anything in the world, but instead, they'll seek the truth of it as an individual. They will find some kind of originality in it because they see it with originality and individuality. Because just as each of us carries our own complexity of ego, we also carry our own divine spark, divine essence, our particular individual consciousness. This is the positive aspect of Aries within us all, this ability to see the world with fresh eyes, like a child. So, in this way, Aries is intimately tied to the age of Aquarius, because the age of Aquarius is about everyone finding their true individuality. It is not about religious, spiritual, scientific, or Gnostic dogmas, or blindly following others, or societal influences, or even blindly following spiritual masters, but it is about following our own inner divinity. Our own inner divinity, and listening to that, and expanding the individual intelligence of our particular essence within us. That is the only way anyone ever awakens, not through religion, books, YouTube, gurus, videos, masters, nothing. Only as an individual, following our own particular divinity. Okay, so Aries has a strong sense of this. Now, a negative quality of this sign crystallizes when the soul, amidst its confusions, makes the mistake of recognizing an ego as their essence and begins to fight to defend its ego or even inflate it. And of course, this happens unconsciously, because if we really knew that we were identifying with a illusory false sense of self, ego, then we wouldn't do it, of course, right? So remember, this sign is a warrior by nature. It has tremendous willpower. It's where we all get our sense of being a spiritual warrior and this fire to walk the path. But what happens when you give this warrior-like energy to someone who wants to defend their ego a lot, whether consciously or unconsciously? Well, they can fight to the death, right? Because that's Aries. And in this type of inferior Aryan person, there's really no point in arguing with that person, because you've probably already lost before you began, right? So with all of that fire energy in its negative aspects, there can be this constant feeling of inner conflict and battles within oneself that eventually manifests outwardly too. Now, if you're familiar with the teachings of Gnosis on this channel, then you'll know that to be a spiritual warrior is essential, and to know how to fight effectively with our own ego mind in order to know our enemy, right? The enemy being the ego. We're all our own worst enemy, right? And to overcome ourselves is the greatest triumph that we can achieve on the path in this life. So there's nothing wrong with spiritual battles, spiritual warfare. But the problem arises when we mistakenly use one ego within us to fight another ego within us. And this just causes more suffering, right? We're not actually getting anywhere. So if we do this, we can't really call ourselves warriors, but just idiots, really, not achieving any spiritual enlightenment. For example, maybe we get angry that we got angry, right? So we're using one ego of anger to be angry at ourselves for being angry. Or maybe we fall into egos of sadness or guilt because we did something when we became perhaps lustful. All of these egoic emotions of anger and guilt never really help us, because it's just a vicious cycle of ego suffering. What we need in that case are qualities that derive from our consciousness: peace, psychological comprehension, illumination, wisdom, right? deep relaxation, etc. Or another example is a spiritual ego, right? Maybe a Gnostic ego, or a Buddhist ego, or a Christian ego, right? So like using those religious or spiritual egos to fight against our self-image of our what we are or who we were before we found religion or spirituality, right? And using that to kind of fight against each other. They're just both egos. There's no superior ego or inferior ego. They're both just ego. So I'm not saying it's bad to engage in like Gnostic or Buddhist teachings, right? It's fine. It's good. But when we identify as that and follow it dogmatically, blindly, fanatically, then this is wrong. It causes suffering because we don't know why we're following what we're following. Right. So the Dalai Lama says this quite well all the time. If you see some videos of him, he usually says something along the lines of, on one level, I'm a Buddhist, but I don't care because it doesn't matter, because that's not who I am, right? He says that quite a bit. So it's like me if I say I am a Gnostic or a YouTuber or a great prophet or something. This is false. That's not who I am. It's illusory. But as soon as I identify as that, I suffer and I don't know myself. So if you ever see an Aries person, and this applies to everyone, of course, but if you ever see like a fiery person who's like this all the time, like really struggling within themselves, but also super determined, because they really want to know, like, they want to fix the problem and they really want to fight through it, but they're also causing themselves a lot of suffering in the process, then this is like excess, imbalanced Aryan energy. Like the person really wants to find out something or solve some problem or wants to understand something, but they're fighting too much with themselves, trying to solve the problem for just too long, not really getting anywhere. When really they just need to relax and find some graceful, balanced guidance from their inner being in their hearts, and they need patience and faith rather than overthinking or overanalyzing things. And if a person has a lot of internal conflict in this way, then they will inevitably, unconsciously generate external conflicts outside of them too, with other people. And this can be perceived by others as being an aggressive character, wanting to fight with others, but when in reality, they're just having a difficult time in their own personal experience. So one personal suggestion is never assume an Aries is picking a fight with you on purpose. It's just that they're fighting or frustrating with themselves and just being passionate about it, really, because it's the element of fire as well. So in this way, you can actually admire the person and their determination rather than thinking they're attacking you personally. Another thing Aries people might go through is sometimes they might feel too different or too unique as an individual, which is fine. As we said, we are all unique in our essence, but we have to remember that ego is the epitome of separation. So a negative quality of Aries, especially if they haven't found any spiritual guidance, is to become like a super ego, sort of striving to become too unique or too individual, like thinking of themselves in a very special way. So pride is a big obstacle for Aryan energy too, similar to Leo. So with all of this fire to know oneself and this warrior energy, which is what Aries brings now, we have to be very careful and sincere and honest, and to use and trust the intuition of our heart to discern what is our ego, what is false, and what is part of our being, our real consciousness. We have to make that distinction and strive to understand it for ourselves. And that's not an easy task, of course. It's almost impossible to go on this journey of self-knowledge, to walk the real spiritual path without suffering terribly. It's not a nice truth, but it's true, because there will be so many times when we unconsciously identify with our egos by mistake. until we suffer enough to humbly perhaps admit or just suffer enough to reflect on where we went wrong and to realize that we didn't really know ourselves in the first place. And if you've been following this channel long enough, you know that this is made even more difficult and more challenging by the teaching that our consciousness consists of only 3% essence and a huge 97% ego subconsciousness. So it's this essence which is what is true individuality within us. Ego is not individuality. It is plural. It is a matrix complex of thought structures acting as veils of illusion on our perception. So we need to grow and expand our essence and de-egotize ourselves in order to truly individualize ourselves. And that's when we begin to comprehend also the teaching of continuity of purpose and conscious willpower. So this is how we begin to slowly and gradually find our own purpose or mission in life as an individual, instead of just going around in life with multiple wills, multiple unrelenting desires. And if we can get a grip of that, we begin to align with our higher purpose and fulfill our mission as a soul in accordance with our real being. We all have a specific internal spiritual purpose in life, which is totally superior to any material ambitions. Okay, so if we want to get a hold of ourselves like this and find our purpose, to really find our center of gravity, our inner being, we have to connect with the warrior within and to will it, will it into being. The Aries Martian warrior within us all is there waiting for us to take hold and take charge of that power. That's why it's symbolized by the ram. But it's going forward when we have to hold on to the horns, right? And make sure we stay balanced on this difficult ride of life and firmly take hold of our individual willpower instead of being just not on the ram and not riding the many waves of life and just being a wishy-washy person, making no meaningful decisions, going here and there, anywhere, not really knowing what we're doing in life or who we are. A real Aries person knows themselves very well and knows their purpose and is very self-assured and has unbending conviction in their purpose and mission as a soul, as a warrior, as a real human being free from the conditioning of ego. In no other way can we walk the path of authentic spirituality, not through psychedelics, not through having nice meditation or yoga sessions, not through being an academic studying philosophy. The only attitude that is bearable for the path of awakening, of becoming an initiate, is as a warrior, a commander, a soldier, a captain, because how else are we going to lead ourselves into the liberation of consciousness? We all have to become our own leaders and not be led by the external world, following others blindly or following the world of our own ego unconsciously. If ego, desires, chasing mental projections of the future is what leads us, then our life just becomes meaningless. But if we know ourselves, if we know what to do practically in order to awaken and fulfill our higher purpose, then everything has meaning in life. So this energy from Mars is full of force, confidence, power, leadership. And usually people born under this sign like to start or lead a lot of new projects. They have a lot of willpower and courage to do those projects too. It just has to be careful not to be aggressive or impulsive and always consider what is best for others rather than just for one's own ambitions. So this sign can also learn from its opposite sign, which is Libra. If you remember the video on Libra, Librans are more diplomatic. They know how to avoid conflict with others because they have this natural energy to take time to really consider other people before speaking or deciding things for them. So, it's really opposite to Aries who is a natural born leader and might have tendencies to just dictate others. So Aries, with this good sense of self-knowledge and self-leading, may easily assume they know others. And while they may have great insights, it may not necessarily be true for that other individual. So the wisdom behind the Libra zodiac can balance and temper Aries. So as we're progressing in this zodiac series now, I just want to connect a few other zodiac signs with Aries so you understand the human body better as an expression of consciousness. If you remember the previous video about Pisces, we basically saw how Piscean energy can get really lost in the subconscious waters beneath our feet, right? I'm speaking esoterically. And it will be especially lost if it's not connected to the top of the body, where our individuality is. So before we can jump feet first into the mysteries of the waters, we have to have a strong sense of who we are with the fire of Aries, so that we don't get lost in those waters beneath our feet, right? So Aries, it represents this first spark of fire, like the child within being born. And to ground this even more and to balance this warrior energy, we need to be connected also to the fire of Leo in the heart, so that we are guided joyfully and blissfully on our journey, so that the warrior within has a good time, it has fun. It doesn't have too much conflict because it has faith and intuition, right? Amidst all of the battles. Instead of being confused or miserable all the time in all of these battles. And we need to also be connected with Sagittarius, which brings expansion of the fire. So you can reflect now on this sort of this trinity, right, of the three fire signs of the zodiac. Aries is the first spark of fire. Leo is the fire itself, which belongs in the heart, not the brain. Okay, so it kind of needs to be balanced or connected here, not just staying in the brain. And Sagittarius is the expansion of fire, connected to the sexual mysteries. And so this is all very significant because it's pointing towards the path of awakening as a whole. And it's relevant to Pisces because in the order of the zodiac, as you know, Pisces is the last one. It's the 12th zodiac ruled by the feet, and Aries is the first zodiac ruled by the head. And so you might be thinking, oh, but you said Pisces is to do with clairvoyance. So which one is it? Is it Pisces or Aries? Well, again, this is how the beginning and the end, birth and death, top and bottom are linked, right? If Aries uses its clairvoyance without the activation or illumination of the deep waters of Pisces, then it's vision, it's fire, it has no depth, it's shallow, it's superficial. And if Pisces is just stuck in its emotional subconscious waters down there, without the self-knowledge of Aries, then there's just total darkness and chaos and no understanding. So this is how you can understand in the chakra series on this channel, we learn the practice of reciting the mantras of the chakras from the head and down the body and repeat. Okay, and so with that, let's get on to the practice for Aries. The point of this Gnostic Aries practice is to charge our head with light in order to awaken the Pituitary and Pineal glands, the power of clairvoyance, which resides in these two glands, and which these two glands are very intimately connected to each other. And for this, of course, we need meditation, real meditation, not just sitting and being, but being able to illuminate our inner world effectively in a real way, and to see and study internal images clearly. We need to be able to observe very visibly our inner reality. The things that are presenting themselves to our imagination. And you can get to a point where you can really see actual images and realities visually. And you can even be there or be in realities with your inner senses fully. Okay, so it's almost like there are five senses in the outer world, and it's also like there are, well, more than five senses within us too, but they're just latent. They're not active right now, consciously. So, of course, this comes with a lot of practice. And fortunately, the sign of Aries during this sign brings this fiery Martian light in order to help us. So during this time, we have these powerful practices we can use daily to nourish our pituitary and pineal glands, which give us the ability to see these internal images. If we can't close our eyes and see images clearly and easily for as long as we want, then our glands are weak and we need psychic nourishment. You know, we're not using them, right? And if we don't use them, they're just broken. They're not active and they're weak. If we use them, if we practice, they'll become strong. Logically, right? It's not really much of a magical formula. It's just we need practice. So here are the practices for that nourishment, and there are some mystical and magical prayers and movements involved with it, with specific words that resonate with universal esoteric realities. I won't go so deeply into them here, but for example, you'll see something to do with Jachin and Boaz. These are related to the two pillars of the temple, which ultimately represents the ascending feminine and masculine elements of Kundalini. I'll leave links below if you want to look into this more, but otherwise you can simply just do the practice. So I'll simply now just read to you the practices straight from the Gnostic teachings. There are sort of three separate practices here. Just do as you please, whatever calls to your intuition, but I recommend to do them all. It will help a lot. Sit in a comfortable chair and remain free from any thoughts for 5 minutes. Then we pray to our inner being as follows. Father of mine, you who are my true being, I beg you, transport yourself to the main star of the constellation of Aries, so that you will bring the principal genie of the constellation into this humble house, so that he may heal my brain and awaken all the esoteric powers in my head. Then, with interlaced hands over the heart, the disciple will make a small bow of the head, saluting the guardian at the right column, inhaling deeply as in a sigh, and immediately pronouncing the password Jachin. Immediately, one will make an identical salute to the guardian on the left and pronounce the password Boaz. One will once again pray to his innermost, like this. Father of mine, walk the 7 sacred steps inside towards the interior of the temple and kneel down at the feet of the principal genie of Aries, begging him to come and awaken the powers of my brain and to flood my head with light. Then the disciple pronounces the mantra Aum. This mantra is pronounced properly by opening the mouth with the vowel A, rounding it off with the vowel O, and closing it with the letter M, like this. This mantra is pronounced 4 times with the intention that the light will flood our entire brain. Next, the disciple will stand up, extend the right hand forward, and move the head 7 times forward and 7 times backwards. And then 7 rotations to the right and 7 rotations to the left, with the intention that the light floods and acts within all of the glands of the brain. Afterwards, you can go into meditation with the following mantra, and here's the description for it. The pineal gland is influenced by Mars, and the pituitary gland by Venus. The pituitary produces sleepiness, and the pineal gland incites us to fight. In this manner, while Venus wants us to sleep, Mars wants us to continue fighting. The disciple should vocalize the vowel I or E daily for 1 hour, like this. E. Okay, so as in tree. This vowel will cause your pineal gland to vibrate, and finally you will become clairvoyant. When developed, the pineal gland converts us into superhumans, and when atrophied, it converts us into idiots. The pineal gland is found developed within the chaste, and atrophied within fornicators. And for the last practice, every night before going to bed, the disciple should practice this next exercise. Sit in a comfortable chair for half an hour. Close your eyes, remove all thoughts from your mind. Then imagine that the fire from the constellation of Aries is descending from heaven and penetrating the igneous columns through your pineal gland. The pineal gland is situated in the superior part of the brain, and the power to see the ultra of all things resides in it.